aristocrat who gets seduced and killed by Dracula.
Spoilers!
Right, no, I knew this from forgetting Sarah Marshall. That part. That was in there.
So that's her best friend, and Lucy's three suitors and Jonathan are the ones who, Jonathan Harker, Mina's fiance, are the ones who sort of start this tiny little battle against Dracula.
Okay.
And they're assisted by, Lucy has a suitor whose name is Seward, and his teacher is Von Helsing, who is like the expert on vampires, who they bring in.
Coincidentally, he just happens to also know exactly what they're dealing with.
I believe in the book that he's actually referred to as being an expert at
sleep disorders and blood diseases.
Yeah, well, he doesn't tell them what's going on for a little while.
No.
Which
he holds off.
Really awesome.
No, I just want to be sure, guys. I'm not going to tell you until we know for sure. Oh, she's dead. Okay, now we know. So let me...
But even then, he doesn't necessarily use the word Dracula until they have to go and spoiler alert.
Vampire.
Kill her again.
It's vampire, guys.
Vampire.
This is a vampire.
Yeah.
He actually says Nosferatu before he says vampire.
He does. It's true.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is something that I don't remember from the book, but I noticed when I was reading the adaptation. Is the term vampire only used in relation to the bats that they discuss in the novel?
No.
Or is it a title for these actual creatures?
They actually do the first thing they do is Quincy tells a story to everybody about how he was camping in South America and some bats attacked his horse and his horse started to waste away to nothing and his horse died. And the people in South America called these bats vampires. The word vampire was already a thing for this monster and had been for a while. There's been a book written years earlier called The Vampire it was already a thing. But it's the first time the word is brought up and it's in relation to bats because that is what, it was already a term for those animals. But after that, he is referred to as a vampire. He's referred to as the Vampire King.
He's referred to as Nosferatu.
He's referred to as Nosferatu.
Yeah. Actually, Sarah, that's a really common fallacy about Dracula. People think that Dracula was the first vampire novel, that it was the development. And it kind of, in many ways, it's not the first, but it did kick off the entire genre. But the idea of vampires and the mythology behind it stretches much further back. It just wasn't necessarily a Western mythology until Stoker brought it to the forefront.
There was one book written in 1819 by John Polidori.
That's
Polidori, yeah. The vampire, who after speaking with Mary Shelley about Frankenstein, actually did write the book. And I think that was the real start of Gothic fiction.
The night they were all trapped in a room.
Oh, yeah.
So Mary Shelley,
Percy
Shelley,
Lord
Byron, and this guy whose name I can't pronounce, were all trapped in a cabin or a house. And to entertain themselves, they decided that they were going to write some stories and see whose was the best. And he wrote The Vampire, and Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, because at that time, the idea of science taking over the world of magic, science replacing magic, was such a big thing. The idea that Frankenstein is the first science fiction novel because it is about science and not about magic.
Yeah.
Whereas the vampires, even Dracula himself is called a sorcerer. His is still the world of magic. What he's doing is not scientifically based.
Right. But he's also, it's, I don't know, maybe this is just my upbringing and my perspective of Dracula, but I've always felt less like it was about magic and more like it was about religion. But that might have to do with the fact that I grew up in a Calvinist little town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But
there are a lot of religious themes,
right.
And a lot of anything religious seems to offset Dracula, and that's where that I think begins, of the crosses and all that business.
Magic-wise, again, because I don't know the story, you don't have to go into in-depth, I know we're time, but kind of what is the magic? What is the magical elements in this story?
Primarily,
transformation.
Okay.
Also the fact that he's dead.
Right.
And they're all dead and they're still walking around. That's a big deal.
Okay.
It's not that they've been brought back to life.
Right.
There's something keeping them alive.
And he's not like a wizard. Like, he can't wave a wand and make stuff happen. But he can transform into, like, there's a mist that he can be. He can transform into a bunch of bats.
Or a wolf. A wolf is a big one. He has mind control powers, He has the ability to not only control your mind just from across the room, but in the case of a few of the characters, from thousands of miles away.
And he can sort of speak to you without speaking. What's that?
Telepathic abilities.
There you go.
What did you?
Is it mentioned in the book? Because I feel like it hints at it in the adaptation, but is it mentioned in the book that he can interact with you from farther away the weaker your mind is?
That's primarily why he picked Renfield. The character of Renfield was they make some mention of the fact that Renfield was already kind of, because he's a lawyer. The character of Renfield is a lawyer. He's also in the book 70 years old. They say that he's 60. Well, he says he's 69 years old in the book. So he's this old guy. He's this old lawyer. His mind isn't great, and that's how Dracula is able to get in and work with him. But
then he was also
able to
Lucy, because Renfield knew who Lucy was.
Right.
I mean,
well, that's me.
I think that's you.
That's me to help settle my mind on coincidence.
Should read.
So just for you, Ashley, Renfield is a mental patient at, remember Seward?
Yes.
At Seward's hospital.
Okay.
And he develops a relationship with Dracula without ever kind of meeting him, and that's sort of inherent in his insanity.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
It's very interesting. He's a very interesting
very compelling character.
So Dracula is not only charming, but he can control your mind.
Yeah.
Can he know what you're thinking, or no?
No, I think you can talk to him without talking to him, but I don't know that he can necessarily. I don't know.
I mean, I have made instances in the adaptation that I've written. I have definite instances where characters who are in control from Dracula are able to know things about other characters that they have not said anything about, and whether or not those are just lucky guesses that Dracula is making, because
he's also kind of a genius.
He's a genius.
Another thing, does he always, I guess, prey on people who are weak-minded? Is that like a thing across the board?
I think that's something that gets in your adaptation.
Okay.
I think that also is something that's trickier, given that we live in a politically correct kind of society.
Right.
I think to Victorians it made sense that, like, yes, 2 women and a mental patient. That seems like good times to me.
Right.
I think it's a lot trickier for us in our adaptation of it to infer that, because, it's 2014 and there's a bunch of kick-ass women in this room. So I'm pretty sure we die.
I think that a big thing that I tried to reconcile with that in the adaptation that I made is it's absolutely true. In Victorian London, the idea that he's preying on women is specifically because obviously their minds are going to be weaker.
Right.
When the book begins, Harker visits Dracula's castle to get him a house, an estate in London, but at no point does Dracula use his hypnotic powers on Harker. He just terrorizes him. Drives him insane without working on his mind directly, and lets other people, Harker keeps seeing things, but if Dracula had the same control over Harker, Jonathan Harker, that he had over either of the women, it's been so much easier for him. But you can't have that happen in Victorian London because he's a man and his mind is strong.
Right, but on the other hand, I don't know, Aaron, because by the time Harker leaves, his hair is gray.
Yes.
He's straight up insane.
He's
the man
not
has lost it.
Well, he didn't know he was, first off, he had no idea he was technically a prisoner of Dracula.
Right.
So I
for
feel
a while.
Yeah, for a very long time.
Terrible representation.
I think in some ways, Dracula just enjoyed toying with him. But if I can just go back for a second to the like people talking to Dracula thing, there's a point in time where Mina can kind of see through his eyes. That's how they like figure out where he is.
Yes.
I think is closer towards the end. So as far as communication, I think it's just one of those things where it's like almost like there's a connection and you can see what's going on. For her, I think the reason that they gave it to her, and I could be completely overstepping, is because she was someone who you want to think of as like a simple character, but she was actually a strong female.
She was a very strong female character to have been written at the time.
Exactly.
Kind of a big deal.
I feel like you don't have to change her character a lot to make her like in this modern. In 2014, a strong character. It's not like you have to rewrite her. You just basically frame her.
Well, the thing is that I feel like in a lot of adaptations, Mina is treated very poorly. She's often cut all together and combined with Lucy, and we're just going to pretend they're the same person. As in the case of Frances Ford Coppola, she's given such like a
Winona Ryder-y kind of thing.
Well, she.
Sorry.
No, it's alright.
The makeup was great. The makeup of that movie was great.
It was great. And like the artistry of that film was
the costuming is amazing.
The soundtrack is the best thing since
The sound editing is great. I took a class from the guy who did the sound editing.
Gary Oldman is very charming.
Gary Oldman.
Anthony Hopkins.
Not good.
Not good in that.
I don't know that I'm a fan of him. It's Van Helsing.
But I like him in general.
Yeah,
right.
he's fantastic.
Zorro?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Oh, hey, yes.
Anyway, off track.
I was making a point, and that point was that because they use that sort of romantic subplot of like, you're my reincarnated wife who died, it turns her into this like this sexual object, and she becomes incredibly weak from a feminist standpoint, and her entire existence is like, Dracula, I always wanted this to happen. Like, really? Always? I don't know.
I think it works a lot better.
Do you know who he was 3 months ago?
I think that her push towards, because she does get under Dracula's thrall, and I think it works a lot better if her push towards, her motivation towards being like, yeah, I'm totally going to go with Dracula, is less sexually driven and more she becomes just as seduced by the power that he has as he is. It's not, I can't wait to get it on with Dracula. It's, I can't wait to be able to do what this guy can do, live forever, and just have all of this power, as opposed to, I can't wait to, bone a vampire.
But I would say
I think, sorry,
I would say that it's not Mina making the decision to want Dracula's power. I think it's Dracula's control on Mina.
Right. But I think that having it that bent makes it less just awful.
Yeah, I think that brings me to something that I'm interested in hearing from you, and I know you have to leave really quickly here, Aaron.
I do.
So you talk about this first, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Please.
That there's also, as far as themes in the book, I mean, we talked about the sexuality, we talked about charm, we talked about power. It's a very moral book. Yeah. And it's very moral from a very Victorian Christian standpoint, and the Church of England and all that. And the idea of Mina being overtaken by satanic power meant something at that point. And in some ways, I think means something now. But to approach it from, well, for instance, I'm an atheist, so to approach it from an atheistic standpoint, it's kind of like, okay, but can we sort of not, please? Can Mina be good because good is good, not because of the good Lord Jesus? Jesus. What are your thoughts on that as far as interpretation and adaptation, and what do you feel needs to be included in those themes and those ideas and not included?
No, there are certain themes that I think